Hello, this is the final video about a founding document in our country. It'll be about the Bill of Rights. The first video we watched was about last week was the Declaration of Independence. We watched one on the Northwest Ordinance, which was created during the time of the Articles of Confederation and the U.S. Constitution. And then now finally is the Bill of Rights. So these are the documents that really set the stage for our country, and with Constitution and Bill of Rights, that still give us the framework and the laws that must be followed in our country. All right, so the issue here, though, that leads to the Bill of Rights. There is a debate in the country. It is between Federalists and anti-Federalists. This would be like, think of today, in our country today. There are issues that people debate. You can think of climate change. There are people who believe that climate change is a very serious issue and needs addressed by, leaders of countries around the world. There are other people who feel like any extremes in weather are natural and not an issue that needs any type of government involvement. Wearing a mask right now. Some people feel very strongly that we all should wear a mask. For the safety of ourselves and others. There are people who are, anti-maskers who don't think that a mask needs to be worn. Policing in our country is another hot button issue. There are people who believe that a radical reformation of the structure of police and the funding of police needs to happen. There are people that would think that, if anything, we need to add more funding towards current structure of police. These issues I mentioned, some of these maybe you have a strong opinion on. You may, be on one side or the others. There's some you may not care about at all. That would be the same with this issue, Federalist versus anti-Federalist. A lot of people in our country would have very strongly felt one way or another. They would label themselves a Federalist or an anti-Federalist. And there'd be people, I'm sure, who, could have cared less. They're just living their life, and it didn't seem that relevant to them. But I'm going to click my video off here so you can see the whole entire PowerPoint. All right. So we have two sides here. We have the Federalists and we have the anti-Federalists. If you're a Federalist, you are someone who supports ratifying the U.S. Constitution. All right, and then ratifying means to approve the U.S. Constitution. So again, at the time, this is 1789 to 1791 is around when this debate's going on. 1776, we had the Declaration of Independence. The Revolutionary War actually began a year before that. The Treaty of Paris, which ends the Revolutionary War, is 1783. But from the time of the Declaration of Independence until the Constitution goes into effect, the document that ruled our country was the Articles of Confederation. It set up a very weak government. Most of the power was with the states. If the Constitution was never approved, if we didn't have a Constitution, if we were still living under the Articles of Confederation today, if America even made it this far, which who knows? It would be much different. Again, most of the power would have been for the states. So living in Ohio, most of our rules and things we'd have to follow would have come from the state of Ohio. You can think of some positives of that, but there definitely would be differences between, say, if you lived in Ohio and Georgia, even more so than we would have now, or if you lived in Ohio or, South Carolina. Would we have 50 states right now? Who knows? I don't know if would America have been able to expand. Any type of national issue like Great Depression, World Wars, it would have been probably more difficult for the country to deal with those, which again would have been maybe made it more questionable if the country could have lasted under the Articles of Confederation. But that's kind of the idea. Can our country last? A lot of the people who would have supported the Constitution would think it's not going to last with the Articles of Confederation. So they want to create a new document to govern the country, and that's the U.S. Constitution. They believed that you needed, because it wasn't there under the Articles of Confederation, that you need national taxation to fund the central government. Another name for the national or the central government is the federal government. So federal income tax will be later, but you've heard that term. But just federal tax, the ability of the national government to tax, to collect money, to collect some type of revenue to pay for its services. They felt that was necessary. They thought you need a standing army for a strong national defense. If each state is left up to defending themselves or maybe working together, if there's an attack, there had to be a strong national army at all times. Also, you need a strong national government or central government, but there should be some checks and balances. You need that separation of powers with a three branch of government setup that they created. So those are the Federalists. They're the people who are for the federal government or the national government. They like the Constitution. And then the name anti, you'd think, okay, they're against anti-federalist. They don't like the new Constitution. They're concerned mainly that it's going to give this national government too much power. That's really what the biggest complaint is. They just, in the timing of this too, I mean, we just ended a revolutionary war against the British, who had a king who ruled our country, who treated the colonists poorly for decades, and that led to a war breaking out. They want to avoid that from happening again. They don't want there to be, instead of a king, maybe it's a president, but it's the same thing just by a different name. They're worried that there's going to be too much power with this national government in the states, in the local cities. They're not going to have any control, and they're going to be just ruled by a new king, so to speak. They're worried that national taxation would become repressive, that the national government is going to tax the people so highly that they can't even make ends meet. They can't survive because of all the tax they would have to pay to the national government. They're worried about having a standing army could be used against their own citizens. And this, the idea of not having a military might sound kind of silly nowadays. But if you think of the timing too, and you think of one of the amendments that will be created because of this in the Bill of Rights, the Third Amendment was about the fact that you do not have to house a soldier, that you can't be forced to quarter, would be the term, or house a soldier during time of peace or even in wartime. You've heard of the amendments before. You've heard of the Bill of Rights. You probably know the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, or at least some parts of it. The Second Amendment, another hot button issue, deals with the right of a person to own a gun. Those are very popular, well known still to this day. The Third Amendment is one that almost maybe it would take you a while to even think what it is. But at the time it was relevant because before the Revolutionary War, that was happening to citizens, where especially in Massachusetts and New England, where British soldiers were were allowed to stay, and the citizens were forced to house British soldiers, kind of the way to, scare tactic and keep the colonists who were starting to rebel in check before the Revolutionary War. So with that having been the recent past, they wanted to have, make sure there was no requirement to house soldiers in the future. And they were worried that a standing army could maybe be used against the citizens. Also, they wanted to make sure there was a balance between the national and state governments. Again, they were basically just came down to, they were worried the national government would have too much power. So this debate, and we have, like I said, we have debates right now. Sometimes they just go on and on. It just kind of spins the wheels and you never really see an end. Sometimes debates we can get to a national, consensus, or at least a compromise that can work for both sides. That's what happened in this case. That was a positive of many issues in the early country, was that we were able to, as a nation, we were able to compromise to come up with a plan that worked at least well enough for all groups involved. So the Bill of Rights, it's a compromise. It meets the concerns of the anti-federalists because it's going to protect individual rights. It's going to protect state rights. And also it works for the federalists because the Constitution is approved and they want the Constitution. They feel like the Constitution is the best, way forward for the country. So even if they had to give a little bit and add this Bill of Rights, it's okay. They worked it out. No one got exactly what they wanted, but together they got something that worked overall. So now the Constitution is officially approved after the Bill of Rights is added, and now there's some more protections for citizens and states' rights. And some of these, and we're going to do an assignment here, you're going to actually make a political cartoon on one of the 10 amendments, but you'll be able to see other people who have a different amendment than you, so we'll be able to see all 10. But some of these very famous, like that first bullet point, freedom of speech, press, assembly, petition, religion, these basic freedoms, these would be that idea of natural rights from John Locke that influenced the Declaration of Independence. So just basic rights every person has. And then also, the next two bullet points really deal with the rights of someone who's accused of a crime. So there's due process of the law, which basically what that just means is that every individual has certain protections if accused of a crime. Those would include, having the right to an attorney, no cruel and unusual punishment, that you're brought to a trial, that it's going to happen in a speedy manner. You can't just be locked in a dungeon for years and not told what your crime is. You're going to, have the chance to have your defense attorney create a case, but then that will be brought to a trial. That there would be a trial is going to be decided by a jury of your peers, not just some individual judge that's going to make the final decision. And there are protections against illegal search and seizure, meaning that the police can't just not go into my house and raid it and take whatever they want without some type of search warrant that was given to them by a judge ahead of time. For you guys, one interesting thing is, for minors, it's not completely, all these rules don't completely apply. We can find examples where even like freedom of speech, we don't have freedom of speech at all times. But overall, again, we have these protections of individual rights because of the Bill of Rights being added. And the Bill of Rights was added because of that debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So again, that's going to wrap up the founding documents, the study of the founding documents, which, as we saw, was the Declaration of Independence, influenced by the idea of natural rights and social contract, the Northwest Ordinance, which governed just the Northwest Territory, which would include Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin. But some of the ideas would be used to create the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Constitution creates a federal system of government with a national government having ultimate power in many issues, but there still are powers reserved for state and local governments. There's a separation of powers. There is between branches of government as well. And then the Bill of Rights, due to that debate between Federalists and Anti-Federalists, the Bill of Rights was created to protect individual rights in our nation.